First is September the 23rd. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Finance Committee. Counselors present at the start of the meeting, Counselor Greenberg from Ward 1, Counselor Maliki from Ward 3, Counselor Gentile from Ward 4. Counselor Humphrey is very much under the weather, so I know that he will not be here tonight. Counselor Grossman from Ward 7 and Counselor Lipoff from Ward 8. And there are various members from city staff who will introduce themselves as we go through the meeting. First item to take up tonight is 337-24. Her Honor the Mayor appointing Christopher D. Bonaventura as a trustee of the Other Post-Employment Benefits Trust Fund, OPEB, for a term of office that will expire on October the 7th, 2027. Is Mr. Bonaventura here tonight?
I do not see him.
Okay. I don't either. So can we get a message, a vote to hold this for right now? And if he comes in, we'll take it up a little bit later tonight.
Motion to hold.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we'll hold the item for now. Next is 350-24, Her Honor the Mayor appointing Megan Kennedy, 62 Newtonville Ave, as a member of the Horace Cousins Industrial Fund for a term of office to expire on June 1, 2027. I did see Ms. Kennedy here. Is anyone here from the Cousins Fund that would like to introduce her or make any comments? If not, then let me note that we've been joined by Councilor Bixby. Ms. Kennedy, this is pretty simple, straightforward. We just would like to meet you, say hello, maybe get a little bit of your background. I know you sent some information in.
Sure.
And then maybe give us some thoughts as to why you'd be interested in the Cousins Fund. Anything you think that's relative, just take a couple minutes and then we'll keep this moving along.
Sure. So it's good to see a few of you that I know. I was the Director of Social Services with Health and Human Services up until March of this year. I am now a clinician with the Brookline Police Department and assist them with training of police officers in Norfolk County, which it does include Newton for this purpose, in mental health and substance use. So allowing officers to gain more knowledge while they're out interfacing with the community, and then also support the Brookline Police with their work clinically. I worked with the Cousins Fund quite a bit in my roles throughout the city in senior services. And then I was at the schools and my most recent role with the Health and Human Services. So I'm familiar with it. I have seen it firsthand, how well it supports families that are the most marginalized in our community, and feel like now that I'm out of working for the city of Newton, I can support and help with residents.
Sounds great. I know that we all know that in Newton, there is someone that will go out on calls with the police department sometimes if they think there's a mental health issue. Do you do any of that, or is it mainly training?
I do a little bit of both. We'll do a lot of follow-ups in Brookline. But sometimes we do co-respond. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee? I'm seeing none. Council Grossman, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say I've known Ms. Kennedy since her days working at Ward Elementary School. She is fantastic. I'm sorry that we lost you to Brookline, although I'm happy you're still working with us in some capacity, and I would like to move approval of her nomination.
Okay. Council Grossman moves approval. Are there any questions or any comments? I mean, your experience, just to add, your experience is spot on for this position, so it's great that you're willing to come back and help out in this regard, so I'm pleased to see it. All right, so there's a motion to approve. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? Okay, the motion passes 6-0. I believe we have 6 here now. Counselor Maliki, you agree with that?
Absolutely.
We're missing Counselor Mickley, and as I said, Counselor Humphrey is ill. Okay, 312-24. Her Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to appropriate and expend the sum of $25,000 for continuing education and training of our inspectors. Commissioner, I'll turn this over to you. I know you sent us information on the account and how the money is raised and how it's supposed to be used. If you could also maybe just talk a little bit about the kind of training that the inspectors will receive from this money. Go right ahead.
Sure thing. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, ISD is looking to transfer these fines into our training account for the reason of inspectors are always doing continuing education to keep their certification credits valid to be inspectors. This is just for building inspectors in our office. We readily do seminars and also needing to buy code books. This year is going to be, or this coming year, 2025, is going to be a new code year for building. And so we're going to have to buy all new code books. So it's going to be a little bit of money that we need.
Okay. Any questions? All right, can I get a,
Sorry.
go ahead, Counsel Maliki.
Yeah, I was just curious reading that the state MGL, whatever language about this. It seems like fine revenue, a certain amount of it must be used to provide continuing education, but that's not the only allowed use. Is that right?
I'm sorry, Counselor, say that again, please.
It sounded like from that state MGL attachment you provided that a minimum amount of fine revenue must be allocated to continuing education, but that's not the only thing we can do with fine revenue, correct?
No, I believe it's just slated for education and for again, like I said, the continuing ed seminars, code books, things like that.
Are we not getting more than $25,000 a year in fines?
Typically, yes, but that account just stays solely for education.
Okay, all right, I was surprised at that. Okay, thank you. How often do the new code books come out? Is that in every 10 years?
Typically, well, it's been 6 years now, but typically every 3 years. Because of COVID, it sort of set everything back. And so we're going to be going to the 21 code, God willing, on the first of this year. They still haven't promulgated that yet at the state, so.
Okay, that's the flowing down from the federal code to the states. Is that how it works?
Well, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, can I get a motion to approve the request?
I'll move it.
Okay, motion's made by Counsel Maliki to approve the item 312-24. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes 6-0. 353-24, Her Honor the Mayor respectfully requesting authorization to accept and expend $1,240,000 of municipal vulnerability preparedness state grant to address flooding challenges around Chesapeake Brook by the Albemarle Park. Who is here to present this? Louis? Okay, you're on, buddy. You are muted.
Thank you
There you
very
go.
much,
There you go.
Chairman. This item is related to stormwater improvements around Cheesecake Brook at Albemarle, and also it includes a subsurface infiltration basin underneath the field at Albemarle and some sediment reduction measures along the Cheesecake Brook. This is all part of the Phase 1 improvements project for the Albemarle Park.
All right, we recently approved some money for this very area also, did we not?
Yes, you approved CPC funds a while back for the park project, and you also approved some additional funding for the planning of this subsurface infiltration and flood mitigation.
I think they may have been stormwater funds. Was that what we were asked to approve?
Yeah, this is for a state grant. The former approval was for for stormwater funds for McGrath. So
Oh,
it's all, we're incorporating stormwater improvements across multiple of our parks.
okay. Questions?
I'll move it.
Okay, so there's no staff involved here, right, Louis? This is we're not getting money to hire any staff. Is that correct?
No. This is just for construction.
For actual construction?
Exactly.
And is there some kind of master plan that's being produced for all of Chesapeake Brook?
For Cheesecake Brook, we do hope
Excuse me,
that
Cheesecake.
no worries. We do hope that the implementation of the sediment controls, along with some plantings that we're doing at Cheesecake Brook, will sort of serve as a pilot or an example for what we can do across other sections of the Cheesecake Brook. But it is going to improve a large chunk of the Cheesecake Brook in front of Albemarle and the Gap Pool.
Okay, but does it also go down I mean, as you know, it goes all the way through West Newton and into McGrath Park. Is it going to, are some of the funds going to be used for down in that area, or is all this money strictly around Albemarle?
This particular money is for Albemarle, but we have secured some stormwater funds to do some work at near the Cheesecake Brook at McGrath. So separate funding buckets, but larger project that does address flooding around the Cheesecake Brook.
Okay, thank you. Anyone
welcome.
else? Council Lipoff, I believe, moved approval. Okay. Do I see a hand up from a counselor? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. All right, top of page 2, now we get into the two large items that we have tonight. The first is 334-24. This is the Community Preservation Committee recommending the appropriation of $2 million with $280,000 from the historic funds balance, $500,000 from historic budgeted reserves, and $1,225,000 from the FY25 unrestricted fund balance to the control of the Planning and Development Department for a grant to the First Baptist Church for the restoration of their bell tower. And this was approved in zoning and planning by a vote of 7-0, subject to second call. Who was here? Molly, are you here for this?
I am here for this.
All right, so you're gonna start us off, so please go right ahead.
All right, I'll share my screen. Just 1 second. Here we go. And I usually just man the slides for these, but I'm here alone tonight, so bear with me a little bit.
Take your time.
All right. There. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is our recommendation on the First Baptist Church Tower renovation. The goal of the project is to restore the bell tower of the First Baptist Church in Newton Center. I know a lot of you are probably familiar with this building. The bell tower's state of disrepair has led to the closing of the entire building, as well as the grounds of the venue, which has been the site of several musical concerts for musical organizations, nearby school graduations, and community events throughout Newton. The project would require 3 construction seasons beginning in spring 2025, and the project would include a long-term solution to the water infiltration problem, which has caused the tower's instability, rather than just sort of band-aiding the problem. It would be a long-term solution. This is what it looks like right now. The building was constructed by Mead, Mason & Co. in 1888. I'll skip some of this, but it is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It meets the eligibility criteria for CPA historic resource funding. The bells in it are famously dedicated to the former minister who wrote My Country 'Tis of Thee. I know there's usually topic of conversation around using CPA funds for religious structures, and I just included the previous decision of the city council at the time that Grace Church came through, which was, it was determined that religious projects must be reviewed in exactly the same manner as any historic resource project would be considered. Historic significance of the structure, importance to the community, and the merits of its restoration process and plan. This is a large ask. So, and First Baptist Church is still doing fundraising. They have a capital campaign scheduled to start this fall. After considering multiple options for how to fund the project, the CPC chose to fund the entire amount requested, but reimburse the church at the match percentage on the remaining project expenses, which was calculated at about 49.4%. So, for example, the First Baptist Church would submit for approval an invoice for $100,000 with proof that they had paid it from their accounts, and they would be reimbursed $49,400 of CPA funds. This decision was made to ensure that the church was contributing to the project alongside the CPC contribution, but also allow them to start the work, the necessary work without delay. And I don't know if that picture convinced you, but that tower is on borrowed time. These are the project budget sources. As you can see, the CPA funding comes in at just under 50% of funding, which is what we look for. These other grants are either pending approval or have been confirmed, like the MHC grant has been received already. And they are contributing 1.6 million of funding from their own reserves. So this probably looks a little strange, so I'll break it down and explain it. The historic fund balance, right now, there's a current balance of about $930,000. However, I'm presenting 2 different presentations tonight, and we approved them in the opposite order that I'm presenting them tonight at CPC. So there's an additional request for $650,000 from this first account here. If both projects are approved tonight, the result would be emptying of that account. So we're seeing things in the opposite order that CPC saw them. So that's why it seems like there's money left on the table here, but it's spoken for in the next project. 500,000 is almost all of our historic budgeted reserves for this fiscal year. We left just a little buffer because we don't know the exact amount of our state match yet, which we'll find out in November. And then the balance coming out of the general unrestricted reserves. And that's all I have for slides, but I'm happy to answer any questions people have.
Okay, is there anyone else here that has, you know, played a role in this approval process that wanted to speak on behalf of the group?
I don't
Or-
see anyone from the project here right now. No.
Okay. Did I see Mr. Ransom raise his hand?
I see Miss
Oh,
Yeaton
there's Scott.
raising her hand.
Who, Rick?
Miss Yeaton, raise your hand, your virtual yellow hand, if you could, Miss Yeaton, just. to-
That's all right. I see it. Thanks. I see who you're talking. Are you a member? Well, Jana, why don't you, Mr. Yeaton, why don't you tell us, you know, your position or role in the whole project?
Sure. I'm the pastor of First Baptist Church, and I'm joined here tonight by Dick Ransom, who is the Tower Project chairperson, as well as Chuck Kassaboom, our treasurer, and Steve Lohr, who's a member of the Properties Committee and Tower Committee.
Well, I guess that would give you folks some standing as to speaking on it, so go right ahead. Yeah, any comments you want to make, go right ahead.
Jana, I'm also here. Councilor Gentile, I'm Scott Aquilina. I'm the architect for the project, working with Jana and Dick and the rest of her committee.
Okay,
Jenny, do you want me to just get started? Would you? All virtual is tricky.
Yeah,
Looks like-
sorry, I couldn't unmute myself, but yes, Scott, go ahead.
Okay. Well, we're delighted to be here for our second meeting within the subcommittees of the City Council. We were with ZAP 2 weeks ago. And we were also happy to receive a unanimous vote from the CPC back in July. So this project is critical. The tower is not safe. We have been working very, very hard to evaluate the status of the tower. We have engineering plans. We actually have bid the project. We went through a modified public bid process to align with requirements from Mass Historic Commission. We do have Mass Historic Commission money. We do have a low bidder. We have a preferred bidder. And our budget is based on the bid from from Anacito Restorations. So the reason that we did that work in advance was to move the project along, but also to know that we had a very well-established and creditable budget and construction cost in order to put together a project budget. So that's what you see there. We have shared information with all members of the Finance Committee. We have a presentation that we've shared. It reiterates some of the material that Molly shared, but also has a little bit more of the history and more about kind of the intentions of the project. We really are promoting the project as an historic preservation initiative for a landmark that is really central to Newton Center. The building was built in 1888, but there's been a building on the site since 1835. And it's been open to the community pretty much since its inception. And unfortunately, because the tower, due to age, not neglect, I want to confirm that, is in need of a restoration and is not stable and not safe at this point in time. The adjacent sanctuary has been closed for safety reasons, and the front portion of the site along Center and Beacon Streets has been fenced off. There are portions of the church facility that are operational. Their education building where they run a lot of outreach programs, and they have a daycare center that is all operational. But the front of the church where community events have occurred for many, many decades has been closed. And I know firsthand, actually, how many groups have been displaced because they've all come to other churches, including the church that I represent, Grace Church. And I spend quite a bit of my time signing contracts for space use of our church with groups like Newton Community Chorus and Newton Philharmonia Orchestra and Capella Clausura and the Newton Glee Club of the Highland Glee Club of Newton. All of these folks are basically have been displaced from their favored venue for rehearsal and performance, which is the First Baptist. And the reason that it's their preferred is it seats 600 people, whereas other venues may seat 300 or less. It has a 50-foot wide stage, whereas you may have a 30-foot wide stage as a place like Grace Church. There's parking in the back of the building, which doesn't exist in a lot of different venues. It also is in Newton Center, which means that it's accessible by public transportation, not only for the audience, but for the performers who may come from different areas within our community. In addition, it has access to restaurants and bars and other amenities that these arts groups can take advantage in terms of their programming, which really enhances their programming and potentially their audiences and their revenues. So I mentioned half a dozen groups that have been displaced. They're all anxious to get back, but we need to restore this tower before we can reopen the sanctuary and get them back. There is some other money, state money, that has been appropriated for another port, not for the tower, but for another portion of this building. During the pandemic, Representative Kate Kahn sponsored an initiative to secure a state grant. I think it's $150,000. It was secured, and that money is to enhance the HVAC system and ventilation system for the sanctuary. We're waiting to do that project once the tower's done. I believe we have till 2027 or maybe later. Is that right, Jana? To utilize that grant. But there's already state money appropriated to a portion of this facility. And I think that also just goes to show the amount of commitment that's there to making this building available to the community. It's a very, very important community resource. And if you've taken a look at the 30-some letters of support that we received from various groups, you'll see Mason Rice School is there, represented by their principal. Mason Rice utilizes this building as an evacuation site and as a emergency readiness site, but they also do graduations and other ceremonies there. We've got the Welland Montessori School, which is adjacent, which does programming in that room. They've spoken eloquently about their desire to get back into the building. The Suzuki School of Newton would like to get back there. So there really are all ages and groups of different kinds, education as well as music and the arts, that are really eager to get back into this building because it really is the best venue that's available within the city of Newton and its surroundings.
All right, thank you. I want to just stop you there, Mr. Aquilina. There's two things I'm going to ask for. First, Molly, since this is finance, if you could put back up the slide that showed us the different sources of funds. I believe the project is like $4.4 million in total, in that range. I wanted a chance to go, yeah, okay. So I wanted a chance to go through and just hear from either Ms. Yeaton or Mr. Ransom or anyone else that would be appropriate, how real these numbers are in terms of having them. Because one of the fears is you get into a major project like this, you know, obviously you want to make sure that the funds that people are counting on are actually going to be there. So whoever would like to speak of, if maybe the pastor could address, for instance, it's what, and I appreciate this. Everybody says that, you know, $2 million is a lot of taxpayer money to be giving to the project, but first thing that jumps out at me is an extremely healthy contribution from the church itself of $1,640,000. So which makes me real comfortable about the 2 million. But is that money that is on hand? Is that money that you are planning on raising?
I'll be happy to jump in there. I'm Dick Ransom, the chair of the Tower Committee. We, at the beginning of the project, we had $1.1 million roughly in our parsonage fund. We decided to devote that entire fund to funding for the tower. We've already spent a total of roughly $400,000 for the existing stabilization we've done, and for original analysis of the problem, and for removal of the bells from the tower for safety purposes. So we have roughly $800,000, maybe a little bit less, available in cash, basically in the parsonage fund. We have planned a $500,000 approximately capital campaign. We've hired a consultant for that campaign. The consultant has held interviews with 6 or 7 leaders of the church and people who are expected to be substantial givers to the campaign. The consultants also distributed a questionnaire, a survey to the church members, and the next stage in that process will be the actual campaign, which I believe is going to be starting in January. So we have that campaign underway, but we haven't actually gotten the commitments for the pledges yet.
So that 500,000 makes up the difference basically between the 1.1 you had to begin with and the $1,640,000 that is part of this budget. So
that's correct.
So the obvious, I mean, how comfortable are you that you're going to be able to raise it? What if you can't raise it? What happens then?
Well, we're committed to starting the project if we get the CPA funding, and if we don't raise all the money we expect at the beginning, we intend to keep on trying to raise it. I know we had we repointed the entire church, not just the tower, but the entire church building back in the late 90s. And we had a capital campaign then where we didn't get enough money the first year or two, so we just kept on going. And by about the 4th year, we had it. So I think we will continue to push until we get the funding we need. In the meantime, we want to get this first big chunk of the project, which does cost about roughly $2 million. The critical part is on the building an external steel structure and then doing some really critical masonry work so that the rest of the tower can be repaired safely. So we want to do all that critical safety work in the first year, and then we would do the remaining work in the second year. And if for some reason we don't have enough funds at the start of the second year, then we would negotiate with our contractor to maybe postpone things a little bit or do some value engineering so that we could keep the construction work consistent with the funds we have on hand.
Okay. The Amelia Peabody Charitable Fund, is that money been secured, or are you applied for it in a hopeful, or how real is that?
So we can't apply for it yet because their philosophy is they want to see how well you have done for fundraising from your other sources. So they consider themselves kind of last in. They're kind of the icing on the cake. And so we need to get the CPA funding. We need to have our capital campaign. Obviously, we are putting our parsonage funds into the church already. But we need to show them that we've done a good job of fundraising before they will commit their roughly $350,000. And they can't make a commitment before we file the application because they've got lots of other applicants as well. But we have had discussions with them, and they've said they think we have a good project.
Okay, how about the National Fund for Sacred Places, 250?
Dick, I think that Janice should really speak to that, that she's been in conversation with them, if you don't mind. I think that might be good. Also, Counselor Gentile, I have slides that actually have a pie chart that shows, I think, more clearly a distribution of these monies. If I could share that, I think it might be easier. It kind of shows you where the parsonage fund is. It has a kind of a more graphic breakdown of these costs. It might be easier for people to understand.
And actually, these numbers are a little bit out of date because in the last set of numbers we submitted to the city, we're seeking 175,000 from the Fund for Sacred Places. I think we originally applied for a $250,000 grant this past year, but we were denied. They did not issue the grant. So we were going to reapply next year for a lesser amount. And on the other hand, we were intending to get $200,000 from the Mass Historic Commission. We've already gotten 100. We've had some preliminary discussions with them. We think we can get $100,000 more. Okay, so that number, so
Right.
so these are the
updated
corrected numbers.
Presentation, right? So, as Dick was saying, the Mass Historic Commission money, half of that has been received. The other half has been promised. They do have a cycle. We have to, in terms of our procurement of those funds, we have to align ourselves with their annual cycle. That starts in the spring. Amelia Peabody Trust, again, they do like to come in toward the end of a project, but they also have an April and October timeframe. We'd be hitting their April timeframe, I believe. Fund for Sacred Places also has an annual cycle. So we did not win them over in our first application, but we've been given assurance. We've been given encouragement to apply again. And one of the things that I just really like to stress is that for any of these Mass Historic is committed to the project. And those funds, I think that we know that we will get. I think in terms of the other outside funds, you have to understand that the CPA grant is really the foundation of that conversation to have with further fundraisers. And also in terms of the strength of the capital campaign, which the church is embarking on. So without the $2 million support from the city, there isn't a project. There is not a project. The tower will not get restored. We'll lose it. It will be lost. It was the same case with Grace Church. Without the money that came from the CPC, we didn't have a means toward a successful project. We wouldn't have had a project. We would have had to demolish the tower. But once that, in the experience of Grace Church, we received our final city council approval in April of 2021. And within 6 weeks, we exceeded our capital campaign target. And we secured the rest of the money that we needed very quickly. And we proceeded to construction in July of 2021. So quickly after the vote. But that was the catalyst to getting these other commitments. So as Dick said, there's been conversations with these groups. They know that we're coming. They're aware of our need, but they're really looking, I think, for us to be able to apply with a CPC allocation within our, behind us, as well, I would say, as progress with the capital campaign from the church.
So, Ms. Yeaton, I think you were gonna, I'd like to actually hear, with all due respect, Scott, I understand your belief in the project and so forth, but I'm also would like the committee to be able to hear from the folks that are there the pastor, Mr.
Sure,
Ramsey.
absolutely.
So that's what like to hear from them, some of their thoughts. For instance, this Peabody Charitable Trust, right now the ask is about 7 or 8% of the total cost of the project. Is that something, is that a percentage that, you know, they tend to, if they like the project, that they tend to offer to support it? Or is that on the high side? Is it at average? Is it lower? You know, things like that. Just want to understand, you know, how real these things are.
Sure.
I
So
had a
this is,
discussion. Oh, go ahead.
so Dick had talked to the folks at the Peabody Foundation or the Charitable Trust a while back, and explained to them the scope of our project, the total project budget, and they said this would be right in line. I think it was like in the $300,000 to $400,000 range was an appropriate ask. So we are kind of right in the middle with the 350. I also want to mention we have some kind of our financing plan here is in our total project costs, $250,000 of that are putting the bells back. And that's something that really can be delayed as long as we need to. So that is, so if funding comes in slower than we anticipate, then that is something that we can basically have a safe tower and delay that part. We are also looking at financing plans, whether through bank loans. There's an American Baptist Foundation that offers building development loans, and through some of our church reserves to make sure we have the cash flow necessary so that we can keep doing the project and get it really like finished to safe completeness. So I think I just want to mention that, the church is really all in on this. I started at the church 2.5 years ago, about 2 weeks after the stones fell. So this has been my world since I've been at the church. And so I have seen their whole process through this. And it has really been amazing that throughout we've had just unanimous vote after unanimous vote within the church, which is, if you are aware of religious communities, that does not always happen. So there's a lot of momentum and a lot of support. So with our $500,000 for the capital campaign, we're feeling good about that, both from the support in the community and from that outside funding. But right now we're looking at this as a 3-year fundraising process. But if it turns out to be a 4 or 5-year fundraising process, we are still all in. And so we feel that with the CPA funds and the stuff the church is committed to, all those other numbers where there is risk, we are willing to take on that risk and take on that debt and longer fundraising plan if necessary. But we are committed to moving full speed ahead with the project.
All right, I appreciate that. I have one last question, and I want to get other people a chance to ask questions. And the only reason I'm asking this, Ms. Eaton, please understand, I think it's a good project, but if the money doesn't surface the way it's been laid out to us, then we have to be prepared, because it happens that you're coming back to the city for more money. So I'm just trying to figure out the likelihood of that, because it's happened to us in the past. That's all. That's why I'm trying to dig into the financials. The community, how does the community fund, first of all, it went from 60 to 85, which is fine, but how does the community fundraising differ from the money that you're raising in the capital campaign or the parsonage fund? What's the thought?
Sure. So the parsonage fund is cash on hand. A church parsonage is basically a house that the pastor lives in. This church had one, sold it, and had decided that rather than basically work with me to buy a house that I live in, I will continue to live in Worcester, and we will use those funds to devote to this project because we think that's where they are needed the most.
Okay.
So that it was 1.2 million. That's cash on hand that we can spend as of today. The church capital campaign works a little different from other fundraising because it is really working within the church community as part of a community building and faith development process to build investment in the community and the building. So that is really just part of the active church membership that contributes to that portion. And so our feasibility study and the background work we've done has been done with that population, and think that $500,000 is a reasonable number that church members can contribute. The community fundraising, that's really with people outside of the church community who have a relationship with the building. So, you know, at the CPC meeting, Joe Jolly from Welland Montessori School talked about all of their graduations and certain concerts they do. And so connecting with some of their parents, connecting with some of the arts community, other community members who have a real connection to this building and are invested in having this space open in Newton Center.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's helpful. Council Maliki, I know you have your hand up.
Okay, thanks. Kind of related to Councilor Gentile's questions. So I understand the revenue side. I'm just wondering, on a project like this that takes a couple of years, and maybe this is for Ms. Hutchings, what's the mechanism for, as the church submits its, you know, what you've paid for, and to get the 50% matching and so forth, is there a mechanism for ensuring that kind of the expenses are on track to where they were forecast to be, as opposed to you're having to spend more money than you thought on some early stage and you're going to have problems later on?
So the amount that how it'll work is the amount that we decide to award the church is appropriated up front, and then invoices are submitted as they come in by the church for reimbursement, as described in the slide. In my role, I would look at the expenses and whether they're eligible expenses to be reimbursed. I wouldn't really control the pacing of that. It's just up to that amount, and everything else is, you know, we don't have any formal phases as a part of the funding mechanism in this project. So they could submit up to $2 million over the course of the project in invoices. And once that $2 million is up, it's up. As long as they were qualifying expenses.
Okay, let me try to be more specific. So say the portion of the expenses related to taking down all the stones are more expensive than that phase was supposed to cost, or the next phase of, I guess, doing those metal tie rods, or the things that are going to keep the facade in place going forward. If some early stage costs more than it was expected to be, does that get caught, or is the bid such that we don't have to worry about that because the bid is the bid?
The award amount is the award amount. Yeah.
I'm talking about
that is not.
I'm talking about between the church and the company that was selected to do the work, the project.
That is between them. The CPA doesn't get involved in that.
So if things go over budget early on, that's entirely up to the church to make up down the road?
Yes.
Okay, that's not what I was hoping to hear.
Wait, I think Ms. Yeaton wanted to add to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say we have contingencies built into our budget, so we are prepared to account for some wiggle room along the way.
Okay, is that like a 10%, 15% contingency or something like that?
It was, I believe we have 7.5% on the hard costs, and then an additional 7.5 hard and soft costs combined.
Okay.
So a total of about, it looks like here, about $500,000 in contingencies altogether.
Okay, all right. All right, that's good. And the other question I had, I wanted to follow up on the issue that came up during the zoning and planning committee review, having to do with can there be a condition in the I forget what the
No.
term was, the agreement
Council Malkley, let me just interrupt for a minute.
Okay.
I definitely plan on going there. That's the second big question I had. I
Okay.
wanted to get through the numbers first.
Okay, all right, I
Yeah.
will hold off then.
All right, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Council Bixby.
Thank you. First of all, I think Councillor Mickley has also joined us. I don't know if it's possible to give him whatever permission so he can also talk. So I have a few questions, but you want to start with the financial pieces right now?
Yes, please.
Sure. Okay. So I guess the first question is, pretty basic, and I'm sure you've covered this in many of the other meetings, but you keep talking about the CPC funds being sort of foundational to this project, which is, again, when we're talking about taxpayer dollars, that being kind of the assumed amount. So a couple of questions around that. One is if the project happens to be less, do we then pay out less, or does those savings go to the church and we pay out the amount we pay? I guess that's the first question.
Yeah, so I think because our match is at the rate of 49.4%, CPC pays that off of every invoice. So if the project is cheaper, all of the invoices we would be submitting, that total would be cheaper. And so it would not add up to the $2 million. So if the project does come in under budget, the CPC pays less at that percentage.
Got it. Thank you. I guess the question is why this amount from the CPC? You spoke to the Parsonage Fund and what seemed to be fundraising, but the largest amount by far of this project is coming from Newton taxpayers, and it seems like the church might have more money on hand. I know it's always hard to make these decisions to use it for this, but why $2 million from the CPC?
I think we were aiming to come in under that 50% match, and also some of the church funds that could be available for a loan are not necessarily available for a grant just because of the way restrictions on them are written. So we don't necessarily have a lot of money to be able to put towards this project. 1.6 is kind of what we're able to do, and 2 million was really an amount to make the project doable and to come in under that 50% CPC match.
All right, thanks. Those are my questions about the numbers right now. I have questions in other categories. Thanks.
Council Mickley, did you have a question on the numbers you wanted to ask?
No, I'll have some comments later, but no questions for now.
Okay. I see anyone else within committee? I don't see anyone else. Council Farrell, on the numbers.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have had conversations, and I'm pleased to say conversations with Jenny Eaton and Dick Ransom and Scott Acalina about some concerns that I have about the financial aspect. Excuse me. It would be helpful, I think, if it's possible, in terms of understanding the financials, what one gets from this is that there's a real critical timeline of when this money has to be available. And the majority of work, as I understand it, and look forward to being corrected, is that the majority of work needs to be done by April or May, so that not the majority of work, but significant work in stabilizing needs to be done by April or May, so that then the summer can be spent doing masonry and fixing stones, so that heavy expenses, as I understand it, looking at a calendar, are going to be between now and fall, winter of 2025. Is that correct?
A lot of the upfront costs are for the steel frame that will go around the outside of the tower. The timeline is that the masonry season only runs from about April to November, because once temperatures get too low, the masons can't do their work. So our goal is to have steel fabrication underway this winter so that the steel frame can be in place and the masons can get as much work as they possibly can done during the 2025 masonry season. It's that March time when there is the freeze thaw cycles where the stability and the danger is the greatest. So that's our timeline, where if we can't get the steel signed contracts, get steel fabrication underway this winter, we lose a good chunk of the 2025 masonry season. And that just adds to increased risk.
So when the critical work that needs to be done, as you're talking, seems to me to be by a year from now, next fall, next
Correct.
winter.
Yep.
And as I look at your budgets, that's about $3,350,000. And whatever percentage of that is going to come from the CPC, you are also looking at $1,700,000 coming from private sources. And some of that, since you have taken out Amelia Peabody and you've taken out the Fund for Sacred Places as groups that probably wouldn't be funding before next fall, because as you say, Amelia Peabody likes to do the end of things, and you've got some expenses that they can cover, like the bells and so forth, that don't need to be done. But the critical work that I hear you say is $3,350,000, which means, as I look at it, that you need $1,600,000 in private money right now. I just don't understand where that's going to come from. I look at your budget saying you've got $520,000 from your capital campaign and $85,000 from your community fundraising, which I think of as basically the same thing. So you got about $600,000 that you have to raise pretty quickly. And with all due respect, and I know there are some people who think I'm overthinking this, but with all due respect, a capital campaign of $600,000 at least is a significant amount of money. I don't know what your capital campaigns were, Scott, for your other church, and I don't know what the capital campaign was like in the 1990s. But $600,000 plus raising right now is a lot of money and a lot of hard work. Look, I support this project. I think this building is critical to save, as I mentioned to you the other day, not just for the building and the organizations that want to use it. I think it's critical in terms of helping other development all around the center of Newton. That it's a truly landmark, critical structure that other people want survived for other development. But I just would like your help in understanding how you really think you're going to raise at least $600,000 in the next year. And you're not going to start that until January, you said. But we already have $700,000 to $800,000 in cash in our parsonage fund.
I understand that, sir.
Those will be the first. Those will be the first dollars spent.
Mr. Ransom, as I understand it, that is part of the $3.4 million that I'm saying you're going to need by fall next year. So you've got whatever the amount was that you said. I'm looking at another $600,000, and then you've got the CPC money, which isn't all of that. So unless you're anticipating the CPC money to be probably in the neighborhood of $1.7 million, the $600,000 in capital campaign community money, and then the money that you have in hand, even that, as I understand it, doesn't come to $3.3 million.
No,
Now, I
we
could be
have,
terribly wrong, and I really, I don't want to beat this to death. This is not my committee. I just think this is a serious concern. Not that your enthusiasm and energy to raise money until it's all raised, but as I understand it, you've got $3.4 million that you need to raise and have in hand to pay the significant bills by a year from now.
Chair, can you let them answer, please? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm done. Thank you very much.
do we have the chart available that shows our tower restoration expenses over 2024, 25, and 26? Because what it shows is that during the 2024 and 2025 years combined, our hard costs are going to total $2,165,000. That's for 2024 and 2025. We have another $1.2 million, $1.25 million in 2026. So it's not true that we have $3 million by next fall. We have about 2.16 by next fall, and then we have to raise another 1.25 the following year. So it's not as tough as you think. Although this is a big challenge, of course, but it's not that tough.
So, Mr. Ranson or Mr. Aquilina, how much, and this should be a short answer, how much approximately is the steel fabrication? Which what I understood was going to be the next critical part that needs to be completed over the winter so that when you get back into the masonry season, you're good to go. How much is the steel fabrication about?
Scott would like to answer that, but he's on mute.
Scott, can you unmute? Are you there?
I just got permission to mute. The steel structure is worth about $500,000.
Okay.
And that that's the steel structure and the foundations that go in. That's a structure on the outside of the building that the engineer has designed in order to make safe for construction. And that's why that needs to come first, and then we would start the masonry. Am I successfully sharing our anticipated costs per year? Okay. So just to counter the $3 million, et cetera, that Mr. Farrell was talking about, we anticipate that our costs, including contingency, which we may not need in the 2024 to 2025 season, that's through the fall of 2025, would be that $1.457 million. That's based on the estimate for construction that we have from Anacito Construction and in anticipation of the work that they would be able to get done in that time frame. So that would be the upper exposure that the church would have to costs. That includes the contingencies that I showed you on the other slide. So if everything goes to plan without any hiccups, it would be lower than that. I also want to just talk a little bit about cost overruns. So
Scott, hold on.
We're going to stick to this schedule because in order to have a successful project, we need to stick to the schedule.
You gave me the information that I needed, that the cost of the steel fabrication, and I'm fine with the numbers as you presented them.
Okay.
Is there anyone else on the committee that has a specific question with regard to the finances? We can always come back to it. But I just wanted to see if there's anybody else. I don't see any other hands.
Chair, sorry, I do. Can I go again?
Is that you, Council Bixby?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Hi, thank you. So I guess this is probably for Ms. Hutchins. Could you just speak generally to how these projects are evaluated? I mean, one of my biggest concerns here is what other things could we be doing with these funds? And when they come to us, they're presented in an isolated up or down environment, and we don't know. Each of us probably has items in our ward or in the city that we would see, as top priorities for CPA funds and other, city funds, and are often, I think we feel like we're told that there isn't funding for renovations to Crystal Lake Bathhouse, or other projects. Can you just speak to how that balance happens? Thank you.
Yes. So the first lens in which we review projects is eligibility. There's 4 different types of CPA funding, and this is historic resource funding. So we look at this project through the criteria of, is it eligible for historic resource funding? The second, we look at the financials. We look to see how much money is being put in, how much money we're being asked for, what the fundraising plan is. As we've discussed a lot tonight, this was a big ask, so it did involve a lot of discussion about the pros and cons, how we might appropriate the funds, but budget and the overall percentage of CPA funds in the project budget are definitely the second criteria which we review projects. We also review them based on need, both the need of the applicant and the community need. We try to match it up with identified community needs as part of a plan, like the comprehensive plan or the climate action or something that the city has put out in a publication. There, we also hear from the public. We do a public hearing. We get letters of support. We hear from people who the project is important to. I'm trying to think of the other big ones. Those are the heavy hitters.
I appreciate that. That's really helpful. So are there items at this moment that you are considering in large amount, or is it just the items that are in front of us that are weighed in that last category?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase the question?
So you said you are weighing, you are looking at what other projects could be out there. Is it the items that we're discussing, tonight that are weighed against each other, or are there other projects that the city could be doing or considering that are evaluated at this time?
We have a rolling deadline. We review projects as they come in. So it's whatever we know is out there, but our deadline is rolling. So there's always things coming in and coming before you. We'll have 2 more for you in the next few months.
Got it. Thank you.
And Molly, when you say we, you're talking about the planning department?
I am talking about, I guess, the planning department, myself, and the community preservation committee.
Is there anybody from community preservation here tonight?
No, our chair had an emergency come up, but she would normally be here.
And okay, no one else could come in their place for a $2 million ask?
It's just me.
No, that's not your fault. But I appreciate you being here and you're doing a great job. All right, if there's no other hands on finances, the other area that I wanted someone to speak to, Council Maliki started to bring it up. As was mentioned earlier, in support of the money for this project, reference was made to the openness to the community that this parish and building has been over the years. And I know that there have been some discussions about some kind of a guarantee that would continue to be the case. If the taxpayers are going to contribute $2 million to this project, I think most people would find it reasonable that the city would want assurances that the community would operate as it has been in the past in being generous in its use of the building and other resources. So can someone speak to those discussions? I know the law department was involved, but I don't know where things stand now, but I do think it's of interest, at least to some of us councilors.
I can speak to that.
Okay.
So
Can we take this off the screen so I can see folks and hands? Thanks.
Sorry, it's Molly again, if you couldn't see before. I can speak to this. I've had a few conversations with law with the law department since ZAP 2 weeks ago. So the conversation is around adding something to the preservation restriction, which would be required. And maybe I'll start there. Any historic resource project that we fund, construction project, a preservation restriction is placed on the property. It is a deed restriction. It restricts what can be done on the exterior of the building in perpetuity. Any little change to the exterior of this building would have to go before the Newton Historical Commission for review and approval. That is a standard condition of this funding. What was proposed as ZAP is something that also puts a condition on the usage of the building and how it's always been open for community events, for graduations, for concerts, etc. One thing, after speaking with the law department, they have said that the best way to have that conversation procedurally is to send it back to CPC after it goes to full council, because the subcommittees can't add conditions, but they can send it back once it gets to full council to CPC with that suggestion. They can hold it at full council and send it back to the committee. And then it would go back to full council again after CPC had that conversation. I do think the committee, I spoke to my chair today and to my vice chair, is open to getting that on their agenda as soon as possible to discuss that condition.
Okay. Who's the, I apologize for not knowing off the top of my head, but who's the chair and the vice chair these days?
The chair is Susan Lunan and the vice chair is Buzz Dunker.
Okay. All right, so I know that like with everything that comes to us these days, you know, we needed to do, everybody wanted us to do it yesterday. And I kind of find that frustrating, but you're no different than anybody, because I've been told that people are concerned about what you just laid out, that it will delay the project. I don't see, someone said 2 months. I don't see why that is going to take 2 months. The other thing is, tonight is the 23rd. Don't we have 2 weeks before our first board meeting in October? Am I right on that? So if there was an agreement on this additional, and I heard it would be a deed restriction, if it was really important to the CPC, it doesn't seem like it's a lot of heavy lifting. They could call an emergency meeting and they could vote on it. And if people wanted to keep moving this along and approve it tonight, and I'm not saying people are there, and if people want to hold it, then we'll hold it. It's going to be a committee decision. But I just want to lay out at the start that I don't see why the CPC couldn't meet in an emergency meeting. They got one item to take up. Hopefully it's approved and would have it available to us to amend on the floor and get this thing done in a couple of weeks. So anybody
Mr.
has
Chair,
any?
could I break in for just a second? If you're finished, I mean.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, the church has concerns, serious concerns about this requirement. We knew coming into the project that we would have to grant an architectural deed restriction. We've already granted a similar restriction to the Mass Historic Commission. That's pretty standard. But the use restriction goes considerably beyond that. And we're certainly, as long as we're operating the church, we're certainly happy to make it available to people. We have 3 tenants, nonprofit tenants already. In fact, we have 4 considering the beautiful Korean church that meets in our one of our rooms downstairs every Sunday. We're happy to continue having the graduation ceremonies in the sanctuary, the musical concerts in the sanctuary. We love having the community groups come in, but if it ever came, and I'm not talking about 5 years or 10 years, but if it ever came in the future that it was appropriate to sell the property, a use restriction would be a serious encumbrance on title. And we cannot, especially because it's so vague right now, it's hard to know what it means. And so if we ever wanted to sell the property to someone, people would not be willing to buy it unless the use restriction was very much filled in, which would basically give the city control over the sale of the property. If we were willing to enter into that, if the leadership was willing to enter into that, we would then have to get that approved by the congregation at a business meeting, because our bylaws say that we cannot impose any encumbrances on the property without full congregational approval. So this is actually a pretty complicated question as far as we're concerned, and we're concerned beyond the substance. We're concerned that it will significantly delay the project.
Okay. Councilor Greenberg.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I'm very concerned that this would delay the project. I don't really understand why we're worried that they won't allow the public to use their facilities. I'm pretty confident that that's what they have been doing and will be doing. And as the gentleman just said, this whole process would have to go through their own church bylaws to get this passed, which might delay further. So I just don't think this is necessary. I know at Grace Church, they use Grace Church for a lot of city affairs and city functions, and they continue to do so even after the tower has been restored. So I just don't really think this is necessary. Thank you.
Councilor Maliki.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have any doubt that this church will keep letting community groups and others use the performance space. I guess my concern is exactly what Mr. Ransom said. If somewhere, 30, 40, whatever years from now, the congregation shrinks, something changes, whatever, and it should be necessary to sell it, that what happens after that? Would the next owner continue to use this as a performance space, or would we have, a preservation restriction on the outside of the building, but anything could be done on the inside that would not involve us still having the public benefit of the 600-seat theater?
Okay, Molly, you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, I have some clarifying information here. The first is that I think there was a misunderstanding going around. I was copied on a few emails with concerns about this as well. That if the CPC ended up adding this condition, that it would restart the whole process, the whole application process, and that also the application would have to go back through committee again. It would not. It would not be returning to ZAP, returning to finance. It would be from full council to CPC and back to full council. So it wouldn't be what was imagined to be a 3-month process or a 4-month process. It would be a month. So I do not think, given the timeline of meetings, a special meeting would be necessary for CPC. This could be on the docket for our regular meeting. I think all of the scheduling would work out with that. I also want to add that CPC can take the request to consider this, and I wish I had staff from the law department here to phrase this, but can take the request for this condition, have it as a discussion item on their agenda, and then choose not to proceed with it and submit it again for vote at the full council. That it's that's kind of how the process could lay out one way or the other.
Okay, I get it. You're all set for now? Council Lipoff.
Okay, so it seems that the process isn't egregious for timing, but I don't think it's necessary at all. I truly believe that this money is not going to the program or what's going on inside this building, but it's going on to preserve the edifice. And that's how we need to focus on this. And it's overreaching that we're going into the program, into what the church is doing, and potentially the next owner of this property 75 years from now. It's just wrong. And if it goes back to the CPC, I would hope that whatever comes out from that committee, we would stand by. It is hand tying the church in the future for potential suitors and the value of that property. And I really do believe it's overreaching. This money is not for program. This money is not for the church. This money is for the edifice and for the architectural salvation of this property that this community values as a benefit. So that's how I see it. We didn't do this with grace. The programs and the tenants help pay for the church, and they're going to continue to do that. I think we're beginning to micromanage this a little bit too much, and I would not want to hand tie them with any additional deed restrictions or otherwise. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else on the committee that wanted to speak to this issue? All right, I don't see any hands. Those are the two things.
Molly has her hand up.
Molly, did you want to speak again?
I just wanted to, as to what Councilor Lipoff said, there would be a preservation restriction, but it would only deal with the physical building on the deed, not, as of right now, not any of the use.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment on this item, or have any questions on David? Go right ahead, David Mickley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so just give some context. I've spent a lot of time looking into this item. Scott came to office hours. We had a nice chat about the project. Reverend Eden had me over at the church, and we took a tour with my daughters. It was amazing. If you haven't seen it, you need to go. It's a beautiful building. Honestly, one of the most beautiful spaces in Newton, maybe even in all of Greater Boston. Really a magical place. And it's clear there's a lot of community interest also, right? We have letters of support from many different groups, many residents that used to use the building. So there's a lot of reasons to be excited about it. On the other hand, one thing that we didn't discuss today is the concept and importance of separation between church and state. And I know that this issue has been discussed in the past with previous items of this nature. And I guess from my perspective, it seems concerning that we're headed in a direction of doing more and more of these. I believe this is the third church restoration project that the CPC has funded over the past number of years. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is the third. And I believe that each of them have become increasingly more expensive. And I don't know if it's the best use of CPA funds. We have to hit minimum targets of 10% for historic preservation over the lifetime of the CPA program. We have done that around 17, 18%. And the questions that Councilor Bixby was raising earlier, I think are important to keep in mind. Not just that this is a good project, but what are the opportunity costs and what are the other projects that we could do around open space, around recreation, around affordable housing. You know, from my perspective, as long as we're hitting the minimum mandates that the state requires, we should then be thinking about what's best for the city, what's best for the residents, and also what's in line with, you know, our philosophy of how government should fund and what government should fund. And those are the questions I'm wrestling with. You know, when I think about what issues are most important to residents, it comes back to housing, it comes back to open space, it comes back to, you know, our parks. And I also had a conversation with members of the see saying that we're not seeing enough applications for this type of projects. So maybe we need to do more, to be proactive, to reach out, to get more good projects through the pipeline. Those are just the various things that I'm weighing for this project that has many merits, but also some concerns and bigger picture concerns of how many more of these are we going to do. Thank you.
Council Grossman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am in support of this project as is. I did also support the Grace Church project, and I was more deeply involved in that one for sure, given my role at the time. I did most of my wrestling over the broader topic of CPC dollars and spending them on buildings with both historical and religious significance at that time. And I really came to see that our history is inextricably linked with these religious institutions and the buildings that accompanied them, and that many of the most beautiful landmark buildings and sites that we have in the city are church-based or synagogue-based, or other religions operate and hold their congregational gatherings and services in these spaces. Over time, in so many of the development debates that we've heard again and again and again from residents who want Newton to look as it has looked in their lifetime and their experience living here. And historic preservation certainly speaks to that, but also to being able to look back at where we came from, and knowing that these landmarks are still here to represent our past. And we cannot change the fact that that is part of the CPC requirement. I don't dispute what Councillor Mickley said, that of course our open spaces and parks and all these other things are very important. That's true. And we do spend our CPC dollars on them. I think the other reality that I've come to understand in my time as a councillor is that the early bird gets the worm when it comes to CPC dollars. People who put in the work and show up and put the application together and go out and get their communities excited are the ones who get the funds. And Grace Church did that. This project before us represents a similar effort, and it's ready to go. And I, for one, think that when we have these CPC dollars available for something that specifies historic preservation, that we should put our dollars to work and start enjoying the benefits of them as these projects are completed and come back online, just like Grace Church did. And I think Grace Church, the work was beautiful. It's been great. And so to me, it really comes down to, do you believe that this building should be preserved or don't you? And I think that it should. And therefore, I'm willing to, no pun intended, take a leap of faith and put the city's money out there to get the rest of the ball rolling. Thank you.
Anyone else within committee? On this topic, Maria, do you still want to speak on this?
Well, I just wanted to actually just move approval when you're ready.
I'm not ready.
Okay.
On this item, because it's an important item and it's tricky, and I certainly see both sides. First, I want to indicate my support for the project, and hopefully I can get to a point to support the CPC money. However, you can't talk about or advocate for the project and talk about all of the good that the parish and the building itself have provided to so many community groups, and not be willing to make a statement of continued support for all of the outside groups that they have been supporting. It cuts both ways. I understand what Mr. Ransom said about their hands being, tied in an onerous way, and I'm not interested in doing that. But on the other hand, this item is here in finance for financial reasons, and we have a responsibility to make sure that taxpayer funds are being protected if we're in the way that we are spending them. I'm not talking about 75 years down the road, but there's nothing that prevents the church from, for whatever reason, for selling this in 5 years. I don't think it's going to happen, but we have to be aware of that possibility, and we need to make sure that this money is protected. And maybe we should have done it, with Grace Chapel. Maybe we missed the boat on that. I don't know the answer. I'm just saying I see both sides of it, and I wish that there could be some agreement on some kind of a document that makes it clear that one of the reasons for doing this or for contributing this amount of taxpayer money, and it's a lot. It's not 125,000 or 400. It's a lot of money. And I wish there was a document that would make it clear that we're doing it in part, not just for the preservation, but for the many important things that go on inside the building. To me, you can't separate it out. This isn't just about the exterior of the building. It's about all the good that they have done. So I wish that the CPC could work on with others. I know there have been some preliminary talks, but maybe there is some language that folks can be comfortable with that will not make Mr. Ransom and others feel as though their hands are being unfairly and unnecessarily tied, but yet at the other hand, make it clear of why we're doing this and the need and the desire to have the community have the same access that it's had in the past and hopefully will continue for many years into the future. So that's where I come down on this, which is on both sides. So I want to see if anybody else on the committee wanted to bring anything up. Ms. Yeaton, I'll give you, I guess this looks like it may be the final word on it, but go ahead. I see you have your hand up.
Oh, yeah, I just want to say, I hear what you're saying, and I think the tricky thing here is that the devil is always in the details. I think if you were to ask the church, would you, make sure sign something to the effect that this is open to the community, that if we sell it, of course. But I can't think of the name of the building in Worcester right now, but there's this one big building and it had a deed restriction that it has to be open to the community in certain ways. And it has been sitting empty and just falling apart for years because the restrictions were written in such a way that no one else could take it on. So I think that's just, however this plays out, we want to make sure that it kind of works the way it's intended and that we all are kind of thinking about that it preserves the community use, but we don't want to have a situation down the road where the building falls into disrepair because no one can take it on.
All right, well, let me see if I have this right, and I guess I'm asking you, Molly. If I heard you correct, we, the Finance Committee, cannot refer this back to the CPC, correct?
No, it's only to reject it or approve it up to the amount requested.
But you're saying if we wanted to get it back to the CPC to specifically try and address this situation, it needs to go to the full council, and then the full council could vote to send it to the CPC.
Yes.
Isn't that what you said earlier?
Yes, it is.
So if I were to ask for a vote to send this to the CPC right now to ask them to take a look at it, that's not in order, if I heard you correctly.
I'm pulling up my email from the law department this afternoon. And it says, the full city council would have to vote to send the item back to CPC with a request that CPC revise their recommendation to include a condition of continued community access, and then postpone action on the item.
Okay. All right, so I think that the way I'm interpreting it is what that email is saying. That we don't, so if we want to continue to move this along, then I guess we should, if people are ready, we should take a vote on it tonight. That at least gets it to the full council. And then the full council can decide if they want to send this to the CPC for further discussion on this particular item. Does everybody kind of see it that way? Give me some nods. Thumbs up is good. All right, so with that being said, Councilor Greenberg, you said you wanted to make a motion on this?
Motion to approve.
Okay,
Counselor Gentile, this is Danielle. We were asked to amend the language on this docket item.
okay,
We received an email from Cassidy. The highlighted portion of the docket item, which indicates FY25 unrestricted fund balance should read CPA run unrestricted budgeted reserves.
all right, so this is back into the body of 334-24.
Yes.
Which line? Which line are you talking about?
Fifth line at the end, FY25 unrestricted fund balance.
Okay,
And it should read CPA unrestricted budgeted reserves.
all right, you know how it should read, right? CPA unrestricted budget, okay. Everybody clear on that?
Yes.
All right, that's more housekeeping than anything else. So why don't, folks, so why don't we, can someone make a motion to amend the item as was suggested in Ms. Flynn's memo, which I have not seen. So, all right, so Council Lipoff moved approval. All those in favor of amending the item, please say aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so the motion passes 7-0. On the main item, Council Greenberg, did you want to make the motion
Motion to approve
as amended, right?
as amended. Thank you.
Any further discussion? So as always, you know, you can vote yes, no, or you can abstain. I'm going to abstain because I want to hear more discussion about this this item on some kind of a side letter or a deed restriction or whatever. And I want to see what the rest of the council thinks, with the understanding that the council still has the right to send this back to CPC. So I'm abstaining. Everybody else ready to vote? Okay, all those, let's do a show of hands, please. All those in favor of the item as amended, please raise your hand. Lipoff, Grossman, Greenberg are in the affirmative. Am I missing anyone? Opposed? Councilor Mickley is opposed. And abstentions? Oh, I don't even have my yellow hand. Bixby, Gentile, and Maliki. Is that 7? 3 in favor, 1 opposed, and 3 abstentions. So the motion passes. Okay? Everyone set? All right, thank you all for coming in tonight. We appreciate it. This will go to the full council at our first meeting in October. In the meantime, there's 2 weeks for folks to get together to see if we can come up with something that everybody could live with, which I truly think is in our best interest for this project, but that'll be up to the folks involved, okay? Thank you for your time. We got one more item, 335-24. The Community Preservation Committee recommending appropriation of $650,000 for the historic fund balance to the control of the Planning and Development Department for a grant to the Newton Family Access for the renovation of the historic former Davis School building, which will allow for necessary code-related upgrades. Is this you again, Molly?
It is. I'm sorry. I've kept you busy tonight.
No, that's all right, but I will tell you something. In the future, if we have requests like this coming in and there's nobody from the Community Preservation Committee, we're gonna hold it, and I don't care if hell's gonna freeze over if we don't take it up that night. So you can get that message to the CPC for me, because this is wrong, okay? You're doing a great job, but there should be somebody here from that committee. So
All right.
having said that, why don't you present this, please?
Let me see. All right. Everyone got that?
Yes.
All right. So hopefully this one goes a little quicker. This is Family Access for their code-related upgrades. Family Access of Newton is a nonprofit focusing on strengthening children, families, and community, providing programs that nurture childhood development, promote effective parenting skills, and support working parents. They're looking for $650 in historic preservation funds. They're going to do accessibility improvements and install sprinkler related upgrades at the former Davis School building in West Newton. This is an urgent need for this organization, as they have stated that they would be forced to cut their childcare slots for children 2.9 years and younger by 80%. So the accessibility improvements and fire protection upgrades that comprise the scope of work are all required by code. The organization has been working with the Inspectional Services Department to get up to date. In my previous role with the city, before I was CPA program manager, I was the preservation planner, and I reviewed the plans myself and administratively approved those. They're all in keeping with I'm sorry, I've been presenting too long. They're all in keeping with the standards for rehabilitation, which are required for a project of this age. It's listed on the National Register of Historic Places as part of the West Newton National Register District. And right now, it does not have a preservation restriction on it, and one would be required for this property. The request for this project is $650,000, which is about 54% of the total project funding. The project is scheduled to be completed in the third shift, which would allow Family Access to continue operating childcare facilities during the day, which is huge. And I was very impressed that they were able to do that. This is the remaining of that $933,000 balance of our historic funds. So this one was short and sweet, and I am able to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions? Well, while you're all thinking of, all right, go ahead, Julia.
Thank you. This came up at the Zoning and Planning Committee discussion, the issue of the parking lot and to what extent Family Access could make it available after hours on a wider basis, for example, to the West Newton Cinema, which was pointed out, that is now a nonprofit foundation. And I heard the answer that Family Access is trying to, keep its revenue stream, but just wondering what is the possibility of helping the situation generally in West Newton Square? Anyone from Family Access here?
Maureen, I see your hand is up.
Yes, hello, everyone. Maureen Lister, Executive Director at Family Access.
Maureen, can you put on your video unless there's some reason why not?
Absolutely not. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Thank you.
Yes, that was brought up at the zoning and planning committee meeting, and I did address that with the board. As I mentioned at the meeting, we already have a relationship with the Allen Center that we allow them to use our parking lot for their events. And we also use our, rent out our gym to local sports teams that use it during the weekend and at night and need parking. So that's something that we'd have to discuss and the board would need to resolve. We do currently do that, but we do charge. As I stated, the building back capacity from COVID has been challenging in childcare, and particularly for us having such a large focus of our revenue around our early learning center. And so we are really just trying to survive as we add more children to our programs and build up our revenue streams to match the extremely increased cost for personnel and teachers and just cost of living. So that's currently what we do regarding our space, and we would definitely need to have a discussion around what that specifically would involve, given we already are involved with other organizations in our lot.
Maureen, to that point, is that entire building all family access programs, or do you use a certain percentage of the building and then rent out some other spaces to different organizations?
The entire building is used by our programming. We have 3 programs: a learning center, a literacy services program, and a counseling program. Our building is used by other organizations. Boards have meetings there. Foundations have meetings there, but we use the building during 8 to 6 p.m. generally, and then board meetings, finance committee meetings at night till about 8 o'clock at night. So it's 100% used by us and owned by us, mortgage free.
Okay. Councilor Greenberg?
Oh, thank you, Chair. So I hear Ms. Lister's perspective on this matter, and I totally agree that they need to keep their revenues up, and offering parking for the cinema is probably not a good priority for them, since they're working with the most vulnerable in our community. So I don't find that an important aspect. Thank you.
Molly, did you want to add something? I see your hands up.
Just that anything extra other than the financial that we wanted to add to the agreement would have to go through the same process we already discussed
Okay,
for the last property.
okay. Are there any other questions? So Maureen, you said you are, talk about the gym a little bit. How much is the gym used? And is there any, well, anyway, is the gym basically, is it used five or 6 nights a week, or? You're muted. Maureen, you there?
Yes, I was having trouble on mute. It depends on the time of year. Sports teams usually rent out in the fall and winter. They do indoor football or soccer. So it depends on what time of the year. We have a field right next door, so youth teams really are outside during the spring and the summer.
Okay, so this is interesting based on the discussion we had on the last item in community groups. So I forget who was in charge of the building at the time, but when the city first transferred the building, there was specific language about making the gym available to community groups, which about 28 years ago, I used to my advantage so I could bring in some neighborhood kids, you know, like, and they were young. but we used to get the gym a couple of times a week at no charge because I was able to cite that original agreement. And then eventually over time, and I don't know if they still use it, but Newton Travel Basketball used to use it on a regular basis. And of course, then we started, you know, we would charge, but we always got a very, very favorable rate. So I was just curious if it's still being used in that way. And I don't know if that still carries over. And I don't know how they did it, what the language was about community groups, but maybe that'd be a good place for us to look if we're looking for some language. So anyway, that's the way it used to be. Anyone have any other questions? Okay, is there a motion? Councilor Grossman?
Yep, I raised my hand to move it. To me, this one is a total no-brainer and very straightforward, and I'm happy to see our funds be used in this way to support a really important organization that serves a really important purpose in the community and preserves a historical building at the same time. It's a win-win in my book. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
I agree fully with Councilor Grossman.
All right. The motion's been made. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes 7-0. So that concludes our work tonight, I believe, unless anybody has something else that they wanted to bring up. If not, as always, thank you again for excellent attendance. And I'll see you at our next full board meeting, if not sooner. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.